Tēnā koutou katoa, Ngāhi nui, kia koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to our council meeting, ordinary council meeting today, Wednesday 30th of October. We open with our Karakia Tīmutanga. If you'd all like to join, it's on the wall at the back. Mai te pai ngona, o ki te tai, mai te Carterton, raro ki te Wairarapa, tēnei te papuri, awhia e Taratahi, whānau, haram, toki, kai. Kia ora. Apologies. We have Mayor Mark as an apology. I have a mover for apologies. Thank you, Councillor Ayling, seconder. Thank you, Councillor Gallen, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Welcome to Robin, who's online. Welcome, Robin. Conflicts of interest declaration. Do we have any conflicts of interest?
I don't know if I need to declare it or not, but in the C's report, it's talking about a grant that a very Carterton Christmas got, which is my event.
I don't think it's a matter for decision.
No,
we're only receiving
councils.
Thanks, Councillor. No other conflicts of interest declaration. We'll move to public forum, and the first item on our agenda is presentation of an award to Tony Warwood from My Trucking, who were they were a finalist in the Gold Awards, the Post Gold Awards in Wellington earlier this year. They didn't manage to win the final, but congratulations on making it to the final. That was tough enough. So thank you very much. A little bit about what you do at My Trucking.
Yeah, so thanks for having me here to start with. In more than one way, I've just shifted out of Auckland in the last year and back down to where I grew up. So thanks for having us back. Yeah, so My Trucking. So we started 10 years ago by our founders, Sarah and Sam. If anyone's been up and down Carter's line in the last decade or so, you would have seen our global headquarters over there. So what do? We have a lot of trucks on the road, and you've probably all heard about vehicle tracking systems and tracking where vehicles are going and all that sort of stuff. We don't do that. What we do is the other important piece about the trucks being on the road, managing the freight that's on the back of them, or at least helping our customers manage them. So we make it easier. We've built a software platform and apps to make it easier to get jobs to the trucks from the dispatchers in the office. And manage those jobs through the process rather than notepads and pencils and all that sort of thing that it was done for many, many years on. In recent years, we've started shifting our focus a little bit. So we primarily focus on the small to medium trucking. I was at a conference recently and the police said there was 4,700 trucking companies in New Zealand and 60% of those had 2 staff or less. So that's where the majority of the trucks are, in small fleets. So what we've been doing is building software to make it easier for them to collaborate together and share jobs between them. The theory of that, obviously, it makes them more profitable and more sustainable as a business. But also theoretically, if we can have those trucks as full as possible by being able to collaborate together, it means less trucks on the road or more freight being moved per truck that's on the road. So that's been our focus. From a company point of view and what's coming back into the region from what we're doing, when we applied for this award a few months ago, we had 21 staff, just looking for the 24th one now. We have the majority of those staff here. There's around 20 work on our site in Carter's Long. There's one lives on a boat in Wellington, one in the central North Island, and we now have 2 in Australia as well. The markets we serve, New Zealand's our biggest one, Australia is our second biggest, UK and Ireland third biggest. We have a handful of customers across North America and Canada and some up in Fiji as well. So we currently have about 720 customers and about 9,000 users of our system on a daily basis. So all of that is all built over here in Carterton by a highly skilled team of software engineers and our support team that's over there. So that's what we're up to, and that's why we got this. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
As one of the judges at the awards, I'll reserve to say how I voted.
Could have a beer after.
All the best for the company with the software and those in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
No, he will come. Perhaps he'll be a few minutes late.
We'll move to our,
It's just
Coming down here now, actually.
okay, well, let's just wait a sec. Put him on the hot seat as soon as he comes in the door.
I think he's got helpers.
He has got some poor people with him.
You're on the hot seat, Chris. Oh, welcome. We saw you coming down the hall.
Okay. Sorry to keep you waiting.
That's no problem at all.
I think you would have received from Robin a one-page update. Great. So yeah, you haven't heard from me for a while. It's good to be back. I didn't want to read out the update, so there's got some detail in there for you to ponder. But I'm going to focus just on the building side of the project, so not so much governance or fundraising or finance, just the technical stuff. So just highlighting that we've got building partners on board for all of the elements of construction. So that's been quite a milestone for us. Some of them have produced cost estimates and others we're still waiting for. We're using them rather than a quantity surveyor because it saves us the cost and we think it'll be more accurate, but it does take a bit longer. We've had a lot to investigate: the soils, the sewer, power, and to name a few. So we think we've ticked most of those boxes, which is important for making sure there's not too many surprises in our project budget. And a key decision that we've settled on is that initially we were thinking about a tensioned or tent-style fabric structure, which is a bit like a tent with aluminium arches, but we found that it wouldn't be economic for the site because of the height of the thing and the flexible walls and the fabric needing replacement after about 25 years on the outside. So we went through all of those, all of that assessment. So at the moment we're planning and costing on the basis of a steel portal frame structure, which is pretty much a standard shed. So that covers work to date. Coming up, we were hoping to complete our costing before Christmas because then we could confirm our budget, and I don't think that's going to happen now. We won't know what tough decisions we'll have to make until the budget comes in. So that means that we can't really consult that design with the community until after Christmas. We need to be really confident about that cost. So design decisions. What we're quite clear on is that it is intended for educational purposes, for learn to swim, for training, and for health in a related way, as in recovery, recuperation, or mobility. So it fits with the charitable purpose of what we're trying to do, but it means that it's not and never has intended to be a leisure pool, and it's not intended to be a therapies pool either, which is something that needs to be hotter and have good mobility access. So that's how we've confirmed our purpose. You can see all of those design decisions listed there towards the bottom of that one page. So the standard pool temperature for a main pool of any facility is 27 degrees. That doesn't work if you're trying to do therapy. It's too cold for people who can't move enough. But it can work for learn to swim. So we're happy with that. We'd like to make it deeper, and we're costing on that basis. And if it comes to a crunch of numbers, then that may be an issue as to whether it is deeper or not. The accessibility. So we looked at putting an in-ground ramp along one side of the pool. And the Sport New Zealand guidelines suggest that that's not essential for an upgrade, but it is for a new facility. So at the moment, we intend to create new steps, which will be more compliant. Recessed ladders is another way to get in and out, and a mechanical hoist. So we can cover a range of options there. And the environment, we're quite mindful that the building has to be durable because of the chlorine in the atmosphere and the humidity. So we're planning to have the standard heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, and also the water treatment to be bolstered by UV treatment, because that means you can drop your chlorine concentrations right down. So that's a bonus for everything, for user comfort and the durability of the steel. So we think we're ticking all those boxes, and that's why we're keen to see the price when it comes in. How am I going for time?
Nearly about 30 more seconds.
Okay. So I think you can see there's been a lot to consider, hence the delay. And because we're operating on a charitable budget, we've had to wait for things to happen to a degree. There's been a lull in the building industry. We're still feeling that. But we've had a lot of generosity, especially from Adamson Shaw, the surveyors, Rig Zocchi helping us with our soil investigation, Tick to Dig for underground services location, and Gray Brothers for concrete. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Do you have any questions, Jason? I've got one, Jason, just in regards to the future project and the steel portal construction. Will community organisations potentially be able to buy certain parts of the building and pay for certain parts of the building, or will the contractor want to do the whole lot?
The demolition contractor's preference and their best price is based on them recovering all the materials. It keeps it a lot cleaner for them.
I was meaning on the new.
Oh, sorry.
New build.
Oh, for.
Yeah, so organisations, if they raise a certain amount of money, would they be able to buy the roof iron, for example?
Yeah.
Or is that all going to be under the contract of the?
Yes, and that's where there's an overlap with building and fundraising, and I haven't nutted that out yet.
Okay.
Good idea.
It is, yeah.
Use that. Like buy bricks, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
Take a note of that. Thank you.
thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ian Hamilton. Come to the table.
You can sit on the hot seat, all right?
Ian is speaking about the proliferation of solar farms in East Taratahi.
Yes, so thank you very much for hearing me out. This is a little bit different from the first two presentations, I have to say, but it's an important issue. It's an important issue for me as a local resident of East Taratahi and my wife, and for some of our neighbours as well. So my name is Ian Hamilton. I'm resident in Perry's Road in East Taratahi. And this presentation is really on behalf of myself and my wife specifically. We've been there since 2016, so not a long time. And the land that we own contains the largest portion of the lowland bush remnant known as Trinia's Bush. Now, the outset, we are not averse to a large commercial scale solar farm in East Taratahi. We live off-grid ourselves. We generate all of our own power and manage all of our other issues ourselves. But our concern really relates to the proliferation of solar farms in the area. So I'll just paraphrase some of the things that are in the notes that you all had. We've been through the process with Harmony Energy and the expert consenting panel for a large block of land that's very close to our own residents. During that process, there were 2 other solar farms proposed, which were going through a separate process with the Carterton District Council with the planning process. So these were parallel planning processes. In total, it amounts to a significant amount of the pastoral land in East Taratahi. And we have concerns about the one remaining large pastoral farm, excluding the dairy farm that's down there, that if that then also sought solar farm for its site, there'd be something like 564 hectares in that local area lost to pastoral farming. Solar farms can be seen to be adding to the national good, and in many ways they are. The energy deficit is well known in New Zealand. It is a very good way to generate electricity. However, we respectfully request that in making decisions going forward about more solar farms in the area, that the council recognises the following. Firstly, we don't really believe that Carterton should be shouldering an excessive burden for the country at the expense of our prime pastoral land. And it is good pastoral land that is there. So one solar farm we can accept, and we're talking a large commercial scale farm like Harmony that's already been given consent. But the proliferation, just because the land is flat and convenient to a network substation, we have difficulty with. So East Taratahi is certainly not the only place that you can construct such a facility. The second point I've commented on about the long-term plan or the district plan maybe is a little bit harsh, and I do want to recognise this council's decisions taken in September 2023 to look at energy resilience in 4 of your council buildings. I do also note that South Wairarapa this morning appeared in the media with a significant project jointly with the marae. But that said, there is so much opportunity for promoting and supporting solar on the roof of houses. And on those houses, they are already taking up square meters of land. And if you do that, you do not need to add to the loss of the pastoral land, because those houses are already taking up that land somewhere else. And I don't see there being very much initiative from councils in that area. And that's not just here locally. This is nationwide. Same may be said for the country's government. Thirdly, while no doubt there's an uptick in work availability during construction, that's very time limited. Solar farms don't use a lot of people, don't employ a lot of people when they're finished. Very, very few in the back room. I know I've been involved with one once before in somewhere else, not in New Zealand. So businesses will suffer. Businesses close, the industry dies, as does the service town. That's really what happens. Our site in Trenear's Bush is very important to us. It should be important to the council. Council has designated it as an SNA. We are concerned about its long-term future when it will get surrounded by these sorts of facilities, particularly because that is the area outside of the bush area that the birds in our bush forage in. There is a map that I put, I think Robin has up there. Down the bottom, that it looks yellow, but it's white. Beside Trenear's Bush is the remaining large pastoral farm in this area. And there is speculation that it may apply yet for a consent to do much the same as New Zealand Clean Energies and Harmony, which is in red, and Masterton Solar, which is in blue. And that bit of Masterton Solar only shows the area that the panels are proposed in, not the total area of the land that would be included in that. And that is a large chunk of that area in East Taratahi. And we do not want to be a small green island, Trenear's Bush, in the middle of a sea of silicon, aluminium, and very low background hum of servo motors, because that's what we will become. So we do ask council considers that in making these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Any questions, Ian? Thank you very much, Ian. And following on from Ian, we have Jill Gregory. Speaking about progress on the 6 solar farm developments in the Wairarapa.
Hey, well, I wasn't aware that Ian was going to come in, so I will basically just add bits to mine. So, yep, I support everything that Ian's obviously saying, and specifically in terms of the proliferation. And thankfully, he had a map, and that's exactly what I'll be talking about. So, just want to let you know about the progress of the 6 solar farms in Carterton and South Wairarapa. Talk about the limitation of the current capacity of our transmission lines through the Wairarapa, and make a small comment on small councils like Carterton as regulatory authorities. So the current status of Carterton proposals is, as you probably know, 331 Norfolk Road, that's currently under construction. 51 Cornwall Road was consented on the 1st of August. Harmony, that was consented on the 23rd of August, but is currently under appeal with Forest and Bird, which went under appeal on the 14th of October. And then we have New Zealand Clean Energy, which was publicly notified in July, on July 3rd this year, but reopened last week and closed yesterday, or for late submissions, and closed yesterday with approximately 20 late submissions. In terms of South Wairarapa, there's Far North Solar Farm. There's a reconvened Environment Court hearing for the week starting the 12th of November. And Helios Energy, we believe, has actually been put on hold. So there's a lot happening in this valley. So putting it into national context, currently there is 50 solar farm proposals on the Transpower New Connection list in various stages of delivery, investigation and application. And approximately 2 or 3 months ago, that was 71. So they have been dropping. And there's probably a good reason for that. So the issue about the transmission lines is that the ability for a solar farm to actually connect to a Transpower substation, like the one in Cornwall Road, is limited by the capacity of the transmission lines. The transmission lines through the Wairarapa, they come from Haywood's substation, goes through Greytown substation on Maroa Road, up to Cornwall Road, and then through to Mangamari, and then that's when they reconnect into the national grid. So if you took the total capacity of the 6 proposals I mentioned, you're just over 500 megawatt. Now we're told that our lines currently can take 160 megawatt. And just to let you know, anecdotally, I was told a couple of weeks ago that the line under the Cook Strait takes 1,000 megawatt. So there would be a lot of energy coming out of the Wairarapa if they all were able to do so. So the issue is that just because a solar farm gets a resource consent, it doesn't mean it will be able to connect to our existing electricity infrastructure without significant infrastructure upgrades. CDC is a regulatory authority. I've gone through the Harmony decision, and in that decision there are 131 conditions, and out of that, 38 conditions involve CDC involvement. And in terms of the management plans, CDC is the regulatory authority for 11 out of the 14 management plans. So small councils play a huge role in these solar farms. So the main issue is that there's no consistent planning rules for solar farms in New Zealand, hence the influx of the proposals coming into New Zealand, and many of them cite too much red tape in their own countries. Our experience indicates that the developers use a bare minimum approach when offering up conditions to protect rural neighbourhoods such as East Taratahi, who surround these solar farms. And finally, I'd just like you all to be aware that these rural neighbourhoods, including East Taratahi, have been under severe stress. Legal advice and thousands of volunteer hours have been needed to negotiate for more robust conditions to protect their rural neighbourhoods. So are there any questions?
looking at, well, my second one, you're saying, full input on the 500 megawatts or not. Everything was being fed into the lines, which are only 160.
Yeah.
I imagine like a fuse wire melting.
Yeah.
So what do you do with the extra?
Well, yeah, I mean, this would never happen because it's hugely, we're talking multi millions of upgrading. So it's unlikely to happen for some time. And all these consents, they have lapse years. So the one for Harmony has a 2-year lapse year. So they've got to start construction after getting the consent. The one in Greytown has 5 lapse years.
Forest and bird, you mentioned that. What you just heard about?
Yep. So Forest and Bird, I actually brought that with me. That got appealed on the 14th, and it's a bit complicated. I certainly can't understand it, but basically the appellant, who was Forest and Bird, appealed against parts of the decision that related to questions of whether the solar farm has a functional need to locate in wetlands. So there's about 1.3 hectares of wetland in the Harmony proposal, and they would be putting solar panels over the wetland. And that's what they are pretty much appealing against. It's a bit complicated with if it's an operational need or a functional need. So the idea is that really the solar farm should be somewhere else. And I think Ian pointed to another area it could be. So it's about whether or not it should be in that particular place, if that makes sense. It may slow the project up for 6 to 12 months, depending upon what the High Court says.
Thank you, Jill. Do you have any?
Yeah. Just a bit further, Jill. Thanks for your presentation. The line overload is, as you're saying, that 160 is 160 megawatt in the line at the moment.
No, it can take an additional
It can
160.
take an additional.
That was something we were told by Farnell. Okay, so that's the number that they said probably about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're dealing with quite a lot of information that we're not too sure about at the moment, but that will all be looked at in the High Court, in the Environment Court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
Appreciate that. Our next speaker in public forum is Graham O'Dowd. Welcome, Graham.
Some photos up, please.
Yeah.
Got some pictures to show you guys. You know, that's probably 18 months old, and there's a subcontractor that took the top off. Now, why haven't they been made to erect it, not fix it at their own cost? It's one of the questions.
Where's this?
This is out in the country roads. This is out to Oriel. The next one with the culvert. You can look at that and go, well, that hasn't been cleaned for quite some time. Now, I think they're supposed to be maybe inspected every 12 months or 2 years. I'm not 100% sure. Johannes? Is it every 12 months or 2 years?
He's not allowed to answer.
Oh, okay.
He's not allowed.
But yeah, so that's all like preventable maintenance. So if that's blocked, then we get scouring on the roads, and then the road starts getting washed out, and then it costs money to repair it. Yep. Photo. That's another one. That's part of a pine tree leading into a culvert. It's been like that for 2 or 3 years. So I don't know whether we're Fulton Hogan get paid to do inspections or not, but what you're seeing at the moment, whether we're paying them and they're getting away with that, we need to start asking a few questions. Yep. And that there will end up like Rumataka Hill, where we're down to 1 lane, and that's a single lane road at the moment. And it was taken 12 months ago, and now it's probably 4 or 5 times diameter. And you can probably look straight down over the bank, and you've got trucks going past it, probably 20 a day. And then you got locals driving past it as well. So yeah, I just thought I'd ask some questions and see why you extended, are Fulton Hogan doing their job correctly, or who's overseeing to make sure that they're doing the correct job and what's required in the contract? Because as a ratepayer, we're paying for this, and it's like we're putting money into a tin can, lighting it, because we're not getting any return. And Fulton Hogan are still getting paid, and no one's accountable for it. So, yeah. And a lot of places out in the country, there's grass about that high on the tar seal, so the water can't even get into the water tables. Now, bridges are another one. Why aren't the bridges cleaned? The vents opened up, the drainage holes opened up. There's one bridge at Tuorau before you get to the Tuorau Hall. There's probably that much dirt on the bridge. So when it rains, the water sits in the middle of the bridge. Well, that's poor maintenance. It's going to cost the ratepayer a new bridge at the end of the day. So, yeah, I just thought I'd come out and show some photos and see if I can get some answers at some stage.
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions around Councillor Ayling?
I just have a question. Have you put in service requests for all of these issues, or has it all been documented on paper? Because
I have put service requests in on a few jobs.
Yeah.
And then I have shown photos to like the mayor, CEO, and this. So yeah. But things are happening, but it's turned around and said, well, right, well, you want another $700-800 out of every individual for their rates to increase, and we're paying for that, and nothing seems to be happening. So I'm not happy having a rate increase when I see stuff like that. It's not happening, and that hasn't been happening for 5 or 6 years.
Graham, is this all on one road out there, or is it on the main road, on several roads, or what?
Well, even if you just went from, say you went to Flat Point, you could drive along, you could see quite a bit of this.
On the main road?
On the main road.
Mm-hmm.
You could probably go out Ponatai, you could probably go up Carrington, Mannings Road. You could probably go through and see a lot of culverts that haven't been cleaned. And I think they got to be X amount of metres at either end that are supposed to be cleared. Well, when you see stuff like that, that hasn't been done for a long time. And we all pay for it. So we've got to make sure who's overseeing Fulton Hogan doing their job correctly.
Thanks for that.
Thanks, Graham.
No, sweet. Thanks for your time.
Coming in presenting. Hey. We'll move on to Youth Council views on agenda items. I believe Youth Council do not have any views on that.
Well, they were unable to meet, given that Monday was a public holiday.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item 6, confirmation of the minutes, which is on page 6. Trust you have all read. Over the next Councillor Ayling, all in favour? Thanks. Carried.
I think if we're making a decision and Robin's voting, that is correct. The standing orders require that members have their cameras on.
Okay, we'll move on to reports. And the first report is item 1, which is the Wairarapa Economic Development Strategy Annual Report 2023, 2024 and Q4 report.
am I able to introduce? The report is authored by Glenda, but we do have Matt here from Wellington NZ and the Wairarapa Economic Development Group. So if we have questions, the meeting might like to direct them towards Matt. Matt, do you have any?
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. First, I apologize. I fully intended to be there in person, and from circumstances, I'm sad to say, not entirely outside of my control, I am streaming from a car park in Featherstone. I almost made it, and I wish I could be there with you in person. You will have received the annual report. I won't spend too much time speaking to it. As you will have seen, we had some good outcomes from last year across a number of areas, including supporting small businesses in general, but also in specific sectors, like developing their technological skills. We worked with Maori businesses and iwi, hapu, and whānau to help Maori in Wairarapa identify their own aspirations for economic development. We worked in the primary sector through Food and Fibre Forum and agritourism. We worked to support the tourism sector as well, the dark skies opportunities through a steering group and a business capability program, supported the establishment of the 5 Towns Trails Trust, and then also quite involved in the skills area, again, across a number of sectors, from attracting health workers, supporting leadership development for the primary sector, skills for the tourism sector, and also working with learners in schools in digital fluency. And finally, in the water area, Wainawa, as you will be very keenly aware of, has been a big focus for the WEDS program as well, with opportunities there, which is being reinforced through the industrial land study that the leadership committee for the Greater Wellington region led, which has identified a shortage of 700 hectares of industrial land across the region, with the Wainawa industrial estate being well placed to capture some of that opportunity. So these are some of the highlights from last year. From a financial perspective, Carterton District Council contributed $60,000 to the program in the last financial year on total revenue across the 3 Wairarapa District Councils and Wellington NZ of just over $500,000, and leveraged income of $1.8 million, the bulk of which, of course, came from MB to support processed water for the Wainawa industrial estate. The last thing I'll mention is that this annual report coincides with the end of the first MOU between Wellington NZ and the 3 Wairarapa councils to deliver activity under the WEDS, as led by the WEDS Forum. And as you will be well aware, over the second half of the last financial year, we reviewed the way WEDS was delivered and transitioned to a new MOU with the 3 Wairarapa district councils and Wellington NZ to deliver a more focused work program with 3 pillars: water, food and fibre, and skills, guided by a steering group that includes expertise as well as local council representation through your economic development managers. Glenda from Carterton is on the steering group, as well as iwi representation. And you will, of course, receive a Q1 update in a few weeks. The short version is that new model has been implemented, has started off really well, and there's good progress made under the 3 pillars. I'll stop here and welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have any questions? Councillor Newman.
Just some clarity around that 1.75 from MB Kanoa towards Wainawa. Did our council secure that, or did you guys secure that?
We supported the council in seeking funding from Wainawa. Ultimately, the lead for this initiative is, of course, Carterton District Council. And so the contract is, as you rightly point out, between Kanoa, the Regional Investment Unit at MB, and Carterton District Council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ayling.
Hi, Matt. I just had a question with regards to, I'd like to understand a little bit more about the conversations and the discussions that WED's had with regards to moving quite a big portion of their program into the Wainawa Estate project.
Sure. So we looked at how WEDs could support the supply of processed water to the Wainawa estate, as the estate is a key opportunity for not just Carterton District Council, but Wairarapa at large. It is, of course, where some of the major employers in the region are located, and it's got the potential to develop further with more lots, and access to processed water is very important to this. So the WEDs Forum actually convened as an out-of-cycle meeting to look at what the forum at large wanted to do in order to support the progression of the supply of processed water to Wainawa beyond what is already accessible. And the forum, including all three councils, agreed to support the project financially, which I think it's just over $120,000 from the WED's budget to make sure that the program kept going. The view from the forum is, again, focused on the economic development angle. It's the opportunity to attract businesses, continue to grow employment for the Wairarapa region as a whole. And we've been pleased to see that the forum was willing to get behind a project which is located in Carterton, but relevant for the Wairarapa, at the wider Wairarapa as a whole region.
Councillor Williams.
Not a question, just a comment, or just following on from Councillor Ayling. The three representatives on the WED steering group under the three pillars, Bob Francis is under the water resilience because that's his particular interest and expertise, and Shane McManaway on food and fibre, and myself regarding skills and workforce development. So we each are liaising with the organisations that are in that space. So my role is to liaise between the skills leadership group and the sector leads to bring, in fact, we've got an assessment process in 2 weeks' time, because what we're keen to do is to be able to report back to the councils that beyond the talk and the admin and the high level strategising, there's actually things happening on the ground that are making an appreciable difference. And one of the things that rather than try and give $1 to 100 different things, what we're agreeing in the steering group is that we want to move the dial the most. And when we talk about what the most important progress for the Wairarapa is around that water resilience, and we believe that the water resilience projects are going to have make a difference, a positive impact to workforce development, to skills, to jobs, and also to food and fibre. So just following up from what Matt said, projects that have got benefit to the region around water resilience, ticking a lot of boxes across all of the steering group areas of interest. And we're really keen to be able to report back to the councils to show that our contribution is being amplified by money from Wellington NZ and other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Matt, I've got a couple of questions, Deputy Mayor Cretney here. Just around the Five Towns Trails on your dashboard, is that information provided to you by council, or is that actually information that you've put in yourself? Is that from you then? So it's yes. There. I was just curious as to who the new board members are. It'll be good for the public to be made aware. I can't find it on on the internet on their website, the Five Towns Trails website. So it'd be good to know who the new board members are. I'm not sure if you're aware, or you could inform us now who the board members are.
I would be happy to share it. I have been told their names. As I don't know them personally, I can't recall those names right now, but I'm sure we can circulate those. What I'm aware of as well is that, if I recall correctly, the way the trust was set up, it does not require, but it allows for, I believe, each council to appoint a representative trustee if they wish to.
Thank you. The other one was around, you've mentioned about the disestablishment of the Regional Trails Coordinator. Do you know offhand how that was funded across the three councils?
Not in the details.
We may have an answer in the room, Matt.
Please.
So I think they're a little bit, I think this is a little bit wrong, the document that Wellington NZ have. So that role that he's talking about was the funding that the three councils were contributing to Joe Delander's coming in and doing that work, that 5 town space, which ceased in 2023.
Okay.
And then the regional trails role was looking in site plan, sort of where one of our staff was doing trails for across the three councils. So that was 10 hours split between the three councils, and that ceased through long-term plan consultation with us. Yeah.
Thanks, Glenda.
Thank you, Glenda, and I apologize if we've misrepresented this. Happy to take corrections and change the record if that is appropriate. What I will say in addition is that we have been able to fill some of the gap left after the coordinator role was disestablished, and I believe through a Wellington NZ work stream, we've been able to support a person for 6 months to support the 5 Towns Trail, and I think part of the role is to also coordinate the meeting of YTAG, and the person started in October for 6 months.
Thank you for that, because that was a further question I had. Just one other point that you've raised in your dashboard was around operational funding from MDC and South Wairarapa District Council following their LTP and enhanced annual plans. Do you know if they've put funding aside moving forward for the 5 Towns Trails? And does Wellington NZ have any alternative funding in mind if they haven't?
Sorry, is that about South Wairarapa?
And Marsden District Council, you've mentioned in the dashboard, both of those. And I'm just questions around whether they had included any funding in their LTP and their enhanced annual plan. So I was just curious whether they have, and if they haven't, how is the trust moving forward with alternative funding? That's all.
I can answer the first part of that question, not the second part. So Matt's going to do the second part and I can do the first. So South Wairarapa District Council had funded 1 year through their advanced annual plan, and South Wairarapa had funded through the advanced plan 1 year to the trust, and Marsden District Council, it went to their grants committee, and I believe the grants committee did not support it.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer, thank you, Glenda, I believe. And to answer the Wellington NZ part of the question, so Wellington NZ operates as the Program Management Office for the Regional Economic Development Plan for the Greater Wellington region. The plan has 8 focus areas, 4 which are sectors, one of which is tourism, and an initiative within that sector is the 5 Towns Trail program of work and establishment of the actual network. So through that work stream, we've been able to support a number of activities, one of which was the establishment of the actual trust. Another one which started just a couple of months ago is effectively a rebranding of the trust, including a redevelopment of their website. So there is a better ways for the trust to engage with the public and their wider stakeholder groups. And then the last one, which I mentioned just before, is supporting the trust through a coordinator. There is a detailed work program for the coordinator. I don't have it in details in front of me, but one of the work streams is to enable the trust to find sources of funding through various sources to be more financially sustainable in the longer term.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Newman.
One more question, page 41. The tourism sector support the dark skies, and you said it's externally funded from Business Wairarapa and Wellington NZ. Was that meant to be Destination Wairarapa, or has Business Wairarapa supported that?
For dark skies? Sorry,
Yeah.
Can you repeat your question, please?
Page 41, it's talking about the tourism sector support for dark skies specifically, and it's saying it was externally funded from Business Wairarapa and Wellington NZ. And I'm just wondering, was that meant to be Destination Wairarapa?
Yes, absolutely, you're correct. That's a typo that I believe I made. I thought I had corrected this. Someone did point it out. It is absolutely Destination Wairarapa in the dark sky space. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Councillor Ayling.
Just one slightly more general question. Looking at your dashboard, it's looking like WEDS has made the decision to sort of pivot away from business support into sort of more other areas. Is that accurate picture?
The short answer is yes. So that's part of the review that we led starting December last year and all the way to the paper that you will have seen in late June or early July to, as Dale mentioned earlier, pivot the delivery of the WEDS to be more focused on a smaller number of higher impact initiatives. So the short answer to your question is yes. The reason that we've taken this approach is to increase impact and also to recognize the work that other organizations and other programs are undertaking in specific areas and make sure that we don't double up. So from a business perspective, obviously Business Wairarapa is a key organization locally supporting businesses, and Wellington NZ will continue to support Wairarapa businesses through a number of our work streams that are aligned with the WEDS, but don't need to be integrated within the work program because they will happen regardless, so to speak, with the WEDS being able to act as a connector to make sure that the programs are reaching Wairarapa the way they should.
Thanks, Matt. Councillor Cherry-Campbell.
Oh, yeah, just in relation to your question earlier, Steve, wanting to know who the trustees are of the Five Towns Trail. It's actually on the charities website. And it's Bruce McCallan, Gregory Lang, Joanna Galanders, and Joel Nataweri. So I hope that answers your question. It's fully available on the charities website if anyone wanted to look.
Thank you. Any further questions for Matt? Thank you, Matt. Appreciate your time.
Likewise, thank you very much.
One recommendation, and that is that we receive the report. We have a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Newman. Thank you, Councillor Williams. All in favour?
Aye.
Thanks. Carried.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Item 7.2. Whoever wants it.
If I could ask or invite Johannes to join me at the table. He has been at least 50% of what we've been going through recently. So the paper in front of you is the culmination of essentially two work streams that have been run in parallel amongst council. So the first work stream headed up by His Worship the Mayor and myself with support from Councillor Della is the Wellington Region Joint Water Services Delivery Plan, which has been developed in conjunction with 9 other Wellington Region councils. The second work stream is the work stream that Johannes and Robin Wells, along with Peter Wimsett and Listen, have been developing for the local water services delivery plan. Our staff's overwhelming desire for your decision today is that we finish with one work stream, not two, to run in parallel moving forward. The demands on us to operate and participate with two work streams have been significant. I guess this really is a question of rohi, geography today. Who is our dance partner for the remainder of this dance? The question might be why, W-A-I. And the answer may well be found in our name, which is Wairarapa, which is translated into glistening waters. So before you today, there is what I think is a relatively straightforward decision on to which joint plan you would like us to proceed with. The option of status quo remains. That's part of the legislation and will be one of our consultation items when we go out to consult next year. The plan from here forward will condense a lot and will require a lot of decisions for us to get through to the 3rd of September 2025 with a water services delivery plan that you and our community are happy with. If I could just add one thing, I noticed we don't have mana whenua representation in the room at this stage, but mana whenua have been very clear with their feedback to myself, to His Worship the Mayor, to the project team, in that they would significantly prefer, they would definitely prefer a Wairarapa model or a Wairarapa and Tararua model. They are not at all interested in joining a Wellington region model. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions?
I'll let somebody else go first.
Councillor Newman.
Correct me if I'm wrong with what I'm saying, the other two councils holding off making a decision, Masterton and South Wai, is that going to affect them putting the funding into phase 2 of the Y+T? And is there a risk around that?
There's always a risk in going first, but somebody has to. And I think today is a day for being courageous in terms of a local solution. I think long term there won't be much cost that we will incur between now and when the other two councils make a decision. Tararua had always proposed to make a decision much later than us. The proposed model, the Wairarapa model, is able to stand up with just Wairarapa, and Tararua could be an option coming in later in the piece. So even if we do just get South Wairarapa and Masterton, who I understand, and don't quote me, it's up to them, but I believe they're making a decision on the 13th of November. So it's only a couple of weeks, and I don't think we will incur significant cost in that time in the next phase of this process without them.
Sure. Thank you.
May I add, so the next major decision will come to you on the 11th of December, and we will expect to bring you a plan. I think it's the Ordinary Council on the 11th of December, is it? So we'll bring you a plan, we'll bring you, hope to bring you a budget. We also will propose to bring you consultation items, so you'll need to decide at that point what our consultation items will be, so which options you wish to consult on. And there may need to be some early decisions around direction as well. So because we only have 10 months left, we have to get through quite a lot of work. So those first decisions will come to you before Christmas.
Councillor Ayling.
I have a question just with regards to risk as well, noting that this plan has to be good to go September, and then we have a local government election a month later. Does that have any ability, will the new council have any ability to change what we've agreed to in the September plan? Or is it set in stone by the government and they can't mess with it?
It's a great question. So legislation really doesn't allow for councils to make significant material decisions just before a local body election. That's not normally required. However, in this case, there is a consultation that will occur earlier in the year that will inform your decision before you make it. So I think with having that consultation in place, you can rest assured that the future councils won't be able to. So certainly without consultation, they won't be able to reverse that kind of decision. But also the plan will have to be lodged with the Department of Internal Affairs by the 3rd of September. So that's as part of this triennium.
Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Deputy Steve. I just looking at page 44, and as you probably know, and probably half the public here know, that I've been involved with this fairly heavily, and it is my passion. So I've gone into it fairly deeply, and I have been for quite a while. The chart on harness, just about there. On page 44 on the bottom with the weighting chart and the percentages, and I think this is pretty important for people to realise that I'm just looking at the chart with relationships and trust, and the Y plus T and the Wairarapa only score very heavily percentage wise in that, and I just wondered, Johannes, if you can explain that a little bit for people, that what was the criteria for relationships and trust?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Diller. So we've gone into detail to how we use the multi-criteria analysis, and what's really important specifically about the relationship and trust criteria was that we got both representatives from Rangatani and Kanunu in the room, and they told us, or they gave us advice of what is important to iwi, and how would we anchor those scales, and how would we measure that. We then went further, and they did the evaluation on that criteria. So the relationship and trust is largely reflects the view of our iwi partners in this.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and I think that is really important. And if you look at the other alone ones, the percentages are right down. So that is a big consideration on my part. But I've made some notes, and I want to say that the decision we make today as a council is an important, and it's an intergenerational decision that we've got to make on behalf of our ratepayers. We need to decide in the direction to take to be part of an entity to deliver water services the best way to our district, and that's important. The options that we've got are basically a status quo like we've got at the moment with an in-house team that we have, but with a separate council-controlled organisation, so it'll be separated from the business. At least one other option will have to be consulted on, them being the Wellington regional entity. There's 3 of them basically, the way I see the Wellington regional entity with all 10 councils involved, a Wairarapa entity with 4 councils involved, and then the Wairarapa entity with only the 3 of us. This is a decision we need to make today, and from that, the council officers will have to steer on that. We'll have a steer on the direction and start working on the entity plan from there. There will be consultation with the ratepayers, and that is important, and which will help us also form the direction that we take in the end. Officers of the council and councillors will have only 10 months to submit a water services delivery plan to the Department of Internal Affairs, and that's a very tight frame with the amount of work that's got to be done. So that concerns me a lot. But so it is important that we make the decision as soon as we can. So there's a lot of work ahead for our staff, and they're going to be stretched. After months of reading and looking at the multi-criteria analysis list, the ranking of the best options for us, Wairarapa comes out at number 1, and the Wairarapa Tararua comes out at number 2, only 1% behind it. So there is a couple of good options there. The advantage I see with joining the Wairarapa Council and Tauranga is the increase in size of the entity, therefore attracting economies of scale, which will help in the long run. It's not as big an entity to control, and with the relatively small community involved, we will be still able to obtain reasonable levels of service and renewals, I believe. This does not preclude us from going alone at a later stage. So one other point that I have from a reading is if we do go alone, our water services will be dearer by about 19 to 20% over any of the other entities from what I can gather, and I'd like that confirmed if I can. But so, yeah, that's my bit. Thank you.
Councillor Dow. Does anyone have any further questions?
That's the question.
Councillor Newman.
With the option of going alone, and you said it would be a CCO, there are other options we can look at with that though, is that correct? And when would we be looking at those options?
You're absolutely correct. The legislation allows for council to ring fence internally. So similar to what we currently have, we would have an activity for waters that would be run by council and ring fenced by council. We would not be able to attract additional debt. So the LGFA funding up to 500% would not be available for anything that's ring fenced with inside council. But I believe that the decision that we need to bring to you next, after this decision is clear on the pathway, if you choose to head towards a Wairarapa plus Taratahi type model, the next decision we will need to bring to you will be around what consultation items there are, and that will include how you would like the status quo option to be consulted on. Would that be ring fenced internally, or would that potentially be a CCO that is separate from council?
Councillor Ayling.
Another question with regards to potential risks that we could be stepping into with the other councils. I'm just wondering, I know Masterton, you're saying, has the decision in South Wai'a in the next couple of weeks. If they're able to continue to vote to both plans to continue going forward, or they have to narrow it down at this point?
They can also continue with Wellington as well as a Wairarapa model. They would just need to fund both.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if they got to their decision and they decided, actually, we like the Wellington option best, and they both went to the Wellington option, do we default to status quo at that point? And we are out of the running to join up with anyone else at that point? We've narrowed our options to this point. We can't then go, actually, Wellington, can we renegotiate? We've sort of stepped out of that pathway. Is that correct?
It would depend on the constitutional arrangements that the Wellington region agree, but it would be the work that they've been doing to date suggests that they won't have any new entrants for at least 2 years. So there would be a stand down period effectively where CDC would be on our own before we would be able to then join up. But they haven't made those decisions as of yet.
Follow-on question. Oh, sorry, Hans.
If I may add to that as well, the legislation doesn't speak to what happens when negotiations fail. So even though we have to go out to consultation with these options, obviously these various options can fail at any moment. And the legislation doesn't necessarily speak to that. I reckon status quo should be then an obvious choice in that scenario.
Just a follow-on question: how confident are you and your team that the Wairarapa model has the buy-in from the other councils that it will require to get to the next stage?
I'm fairly confident. And I say that for a number of reasons. One, mana whenua have made their views abundantly clear to all of the councils involved that they would prefer a Wairarapa-based model. And I think we ignore that view at our peril. I also have significant feedback from South Wairarapa who have struggled with their relationship with Wellington Water a little bit. I fear that I feel that they are confident when they'll be asked to make a decision that they'll participate with at least with a Wairarapa type model. You are correct in saying the risk will be should Masterton choose to not participate in a Wairarapa model, that may create more of a problem, particularly given they have a large populace, a large revenue base, and that adds scale to the model. So they are probably the largest risk for us at this point.
Councillor Lawrence?
I think we need to avoid getting too far ahead of ourselves. Our decision we have to make today is quite straightforward, really. It's not to be taken lightly, but it's a choice between which of these two models we support or whether we want to go ahead with both, which I suspect gets very little support from Johannes. I think once we get past this decision, things will start to get even more complex when we start to argue about assets and debt and structures and a whole raft of things. But I think we have to get past this decision before we start worrying about that. So I just think we need to keep it in our little box today.
Johannes, I have a question just around under the background on page 42, just for clarity for the community, where it says this will mean targeted rates for water, wastewater, and stormwater services will be funded 100% by those connected to or able to connect to those services. I was going to ask you. In the instance where a CCO is established, CDC will become a customer of the CCO. Can you just provide some clarity around why CDC will become a customer of the CCO as well?
Sure. I thought it was my comment, but if it was your comment, it was a joint paper.
Yes. So thank you, Chair. So basically, the CCO will become the service, the entity that's providing the service to its customers, and the council or anybody connected to the network will be a customer paying for the service. In what regard? So what things would council be charged for is where I'm coming from. So similar to what a current water user is paying for the water service, the council will become a user of that service. So everything that's entailed within the water service, so everything that's currently within the water services bill, that will come to council for the volume used or the metric in which it's measured out. So like the event centre and the event centre, Romanga Roads,
the main office, the swimming pool.
Yep. Yes.
Half full of swimming pool this year.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Further discussion.
Councillor Cherry-Campbell, has she got a hand up?
No.
No. Oh, sorry. That's a little red.
If there's no further questions, I'd just like to, on behalf of Mayor Ron, just read out a couple of comments that he has made. He said if council, he has full confidence that council will make the best decision today in regards to this item. He said if council should ask to know where I stand on this decision, you may wish to advise them, as I am, that he would support recommendation 5A, 6 and 7. Mayor Ron would also like to acknowledge the incredible work done by Robin Wells, as South Wairarapa District Council as the project lead, and all staff across the 3 Wairarapa councils that have brought the best possible advice over the many months that they've been working on this matter, and including the work they did in tandem with the Wellington Region Water Services Delivery Plan project. And he would also like to thank Councillor Della for being his backup on the AOG and a good sounding board for him. Thanks, man. So, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just following along from Mayor Ron's comments, you know, the information that we've got from the project team, not just the Wairarapa project team, but also the Wellington one, outstanding. You know, and I think if DIA had to put the work in under Three Waters and got that level of detail to councillors, they might not have got the same pushback and response. You know, to be told by DIA that they're building the plane while they're flying it doesn't give anybody any confidence to hop on that plane. But in this case, in preparation for the decision that we're going to make or have to make, the information in there is outstanding. You know, sure, it takes a lot of wading through, but you've given us enough information, I think, to be able to make some fairly clear decisions on behalf of the residents and ratepayers. So I just want to acknowledge the amount of work that's gone into that. In terms of the choices we've got, I think both previous governments, or this government and the previous government, have been really adamant that change is essential. So if everybody defaults to status quo because we're too scared to make a decision, then ultimately a government's going to pull a different lever to ensure that change happens. Otherwise, it's all talk and no progress. I, like Mayor Ron, I support the Y+T model, because I think when it goes out to consultation, in the last probably 10 or 12 years, anything that's involved the Greater Wellington region, people have pushed back on. When I think about amalgamation, merger, you know, notwithstanding some of the current water challenges that are clear in Wellington and Porirua and other places, if we put up status quo and a proposal that includes Wellington region, I absolutely believe the people will not go with that as a realistic option, because Wairarapa people fundamentally are not comfortable with Wellington people making decisions on our behalf and vice versa. So it's important that whatever we put up as that comparison option to status quo has to be something that's going to be as close to palatable as possible to the Wairarapa people. And so for me, the Wairarapa plus Tararua, providing Tararua ready and willing, I'd be happy to be Wairarapa and leave the door banging for the tea when or if it happens. But as the paper's going, the Y+T is fine. I personally don't think, a bit like Councillor Lawrence, I don't think there's a massive risk for us at this stage on the decision we make. We're not a front runner in terms of size and scale. We're not going to derail the process going forward. And I truly believe that where we start is not where we're going to end. This thing's going to evolve. It might even be that it takes so long that there's a government election and they get squirrely as well. So I think I'm pretty comfortable to make the decision that enables us to move forward, mindful of the costs that it's going to be to put into the next tranche of work that is going to have to take place. So for me, the Y+T is the logical next step for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Most of my questions have been answered, but you know, as I say, I think that many people have said to me, going with Wellington would be just be lynching mobs. I think. I think we'd like to keep our feet on the floor here. Such as already standards and poors have downgraded Hutt City. They're calling it now a world record low for standards and poor for their credit rating. It's part of their upgrading their sewer plant. They're in a poor state there. But, that's all part of what's going to happen on the other side of the hill.
Mr. Newman.
Firstly, there's a lot of information and I appreciate your time, Johannes, and helping explain it to me because it's not my forte. But I've tried really hard.
It is now.
I know, ask me anything. So I've been having lots of thoughts about it and trying to think long term and that intergenerational view on things. And two key things that were mentioned, I think, in the workshops were that there's always going to be one partner who's going to need more financial help now. You know, there's always going to be someone who needs to be pulled up, and that'll be us at some point. So you need to look bigger than tomorrow. It's, you know, long term, and to not put too much emphasis on the financials because they're kind of a best guess. No one actually knows until we're in it and we've decided exactly what that's going to look like. So I thought they were two really good points that I've had in the back of my mind. And so I think, as same with you guys, that Y+T is the way to go. I think it makes sense with our electoral boundaries as well. You know, we're all in the same area. We can leverage the economies of scale while also ensuring we've got our little voice heard around the table, and in respecting what mana whenua views are on Aotearoa. It just, that, to me, that's the logical, one to go with. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Newman.
Robin?
Yeah, I tautoko what everyone's just said as well. I think Lou, you just summed it up. It's intergenerational, and there are going to be winners and losers in the short term. But I think in the long term, having a combined rohi that matches the electoral roll and our mana whenua, that to me is really, really important. And yes, our infrastructure is in a really, really good place at the moment, and some of our neighbours are less so. But again, in years to come, that coin's going to be flipped, and it's going to be us needing the infrastructure. And I think, Brian, thank you so much for all the work you've done and explaining to me the ins and outs after all the meetings that you have been involved in. Your information and advice has just been fabulous, because without you around that table, I don't think personally, and Johannes and obviously Jeff, but I don't think I would have had it explained to me as well if you weren't there. So Brian, thank you so much for everything you've done. And to me at this stage, Y+T, and whether T decide to come in with us, that is for me the preference as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. I've just got a few points that I'd like to read out. I especially want to thank the Local Waters Done Well team for your in-depth reports and the presentations that we've received over the last few months. Johannes, your multi-criteria analysis, which Castalia peer-reviewed and found to be extremely robust, should provide some kind of backbone for future decisions that are made amongst many other councils as well. So I just want to thank you, because it's assisted us. I feel it's assisted us immensely in choosing our preferred partner. I still want to say that I think it's assisted us, but it's still a gamble as to which horse will win the race. But your data has given us the ability to select the horse that may have the best chance of producing results over time. So if we think about selecting a possible partner based solely on the financial basis, it would probably be easy, and we'd be leaning towards Wellington Regional model. But for me, I want to ensure our community have the best possible levels of service, not just now, but in the future. And with that in mind, I don't see Wellington even in the picture at all. So I also want to thank Wairarapa, Iwi and Hapu for their guidance, because that certainly assisted me in helping to choose who we might partner. And I think removing or minimising any potential complexities has to be an extremely positive aspect of Y+T, or even Y, for our combined districts. Although I'm still extremely wary of central government, and they haven't provided any legislation around stormwater. And I think that is still concerning, how that's going to be managed going forward. My final comment is that I see this as a positive step in the right direction, especially when considering the future of the Wairarapa, all of our councils, and the potential for amalgamation following on from this. And for me, that's next cab off the rank, and it'll be followed very closely, hopefully by the creation of a unitary authority. So I'm all for the Y. and the Y plus T. So with that, if no one's got anything further, we'll move to the recommendations. If everyone's in favour, I'm happy to take the recommendations 1 to 4. If you're in favour with that, I'm happy to move that. We have a seconder. Councillor Ayling, all in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? And recommendation 5 is that we resolves to either A, exit the Joint Wellington Regional Water Services Delivery Plan project, or B, continue the development of Joint Wellington Regional Water Services Delivery Plan project. Do we have a?
I move for 5.
Which one?
A.
You move 5A?
I'll second that, Brian.
Thank you, Councillor Cherry-Campbell. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Recommendation 6 resolves to continue the development of the joint Wairarapa and Taratahi Water Services Delivery Plan for consultation alongside the current model. Mover, Councillor Newman and Councillor Williams, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. And item 7.
Just note the typo, the next ordinary council meeting is on the 11th of December, not the 4th.
Thank you. Notes the Chief Executive will draft an agreement with participating councils for the development of a joint Y plus T WSDP and bring this to council for consideration on the 11th of December 2024. Councillor
I'm
Della.
happy to move that.
Thank you, Councillor Cherry-Campbell. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, team.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roger.
Certainly a step ahead of our neighbours.
First decision.
Okay.
I don't mean to rain on your parade, but it gets harder from here.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a lot of work, and your comments to the team that have been working on it are gratefully received. Thank you.
Item 7.3, the amendment to the rates resolution 24-25 on page 50. Welcome, Carol.
Good afternoon, councillors. This is just a minor amendment to the previous rates resolution that was tabled on the 18th of September. It is almost exactly the same as the report on the 18th, which contained a minor typo on page 7 under the Wainawa water rates, targeted water rates. So the resolution stated that in under the Wainawa water rates, under point B, the previous resolution stated 2.68 and it should have been 2.60. The impact of this rate is not wide because it's one customer, and the fees and charges were correct and the LTP was correct. So it was just simply the resolution on that day. So we have to represent the entire resolution with the correct numbers.
That's page 56 if you're looking for it.
Yeah.
Slight amendment. Any questions?
Can I just also add the invoicing that occurred shortly after the rates resolution was also correct?
Good.
Thank you. Good to know.
So what we charged them was not what we passed.
Not in the resolution, but in the LTP.
Because I used the LTP number. I went and checked the LTP.
Right, but we're talking about 8 cents.
Yep.
Okay.
That is correct.
No questions? Further questions? Discussion?
There's no more discussion. Recommendation, but I'm not quite sure what I'm recommended option here. I'm not going to read it all. I'll move the recommendation as printed. With the
51 if you're looking for it.
I'm happy to second that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Thank Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Okay, item 7.4, Belvedere Hall, removal of reserve status update on page 59.
Thank you. So it's like the little train that could, this hall, it keeps on giving. So Belvedere Hall, we're going through the disposal process. It's been taking quite a long time. There was delays due to central government elections and backlog of work that's been required at Department of Conservation. So we're now moving, and with the movement came a report from Heritage New Zealand, which has evidence that there is what they believe is some historical value to Belvedere Hall, and that it's representative of a key rural community facility. So as the previous school, with almost 140 years worth of history to it, and it is associated with the historically significant architect Thomas Turnbull. So they've wanted us to bring this report back to council at this stage to ask council if, knowing this information and knowing that it now has that historical value, if we would like to reconsider our decision to remove the reserve status and move ahead with sale of the property. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Splendid.
Yeah.
Questions? Councillor Della.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Steve, Glenda, now that this this piece of information has come forward, have the residents or the Hall residents or district been advised of this historic status? Or
no, not at this stage. So this information has come back to us, and DOC have advised that they would like us to make that decision going forward. So the community hasn't been advised of the historical status of it. However, I'd just like to mention that we did have at the last council meeting community members come up and talk about a different proposal for the Belvedere Reserve area. Yeah.
It's, yeah, understand that. I'm just wondering whether the best way forward, and I know it's going to stretch it out a little bit more, is to advise the community, the Belvedere community, of the information that has come forward, and whether that changes their thoughts on what they want. If it doesn't, I would say proceed with what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I think this is the third time I've been in this situation elsewhere of, you know, it's such a convoluted process to get any sort of movement. I agree, Glenda, we did have the public gallery, but their proposal was to get rid of the hall as well and plant it out. And the communities, the people living there that went through the process to agree to give it back to council to get rid of it, had all been in that, or number had been in the community for generations. I think it's a bit rich for the heritage people to say, yeah, it's great, but there's no money forthcoming. So there's no offer of
repair
of any support, because the community itself couldn't afford to maintain the hall, and gifted it to council to do the work that no one else wants to fund. For me, this doesn't change anything around the decision that we made. And in each case that I've been involved in the past, the sooner the building's not there to debate over, the better. Honestly, because while it's still there, people try and find somebody that'll endorse it still staying there. But the fundamental reasons that we took into account when we made the decision, I don't think have altered. Well, to me, they haven't altered at all. Someone else has got a point of view that it's a great building. Fine. Put up the money to help us do something with it. That's not forthcoming. So we made the right decision, and we still do, in my opinion.
Questions, Councillor Lawrence?
Yeah, I mean, the question of the building, I think, is pretty straightforward. better off without it. Whether we proceed to sell the property might be a source of discussion around the wildlife corridor from Fensham to the, it was all explained to us a couple of weeks ago, but I'm convinced about that as well. This is only 1,300 square metres. But that's something we can consider later. But I think we should not avoid removing reserve status, which I think is what this is about.
So the decision that was made in 2021 was to move ahead with the removal of the reserve status.
The heritage people don't want the building and the windows. I don't think they'll change from out, so I think just move on.
Yeah, I think we could save the windows.
Yeah, that was my only thought.
Sorry,
Give them the windows.
just to clarify, it's only one window.
Are these others around the back?
Around the back.
Those windows around the back are not.
From
It
a
is
different colour.
Special.
It is just this window here. On page 61.
Heritage New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the ones
Yeah.
around the back.
Yeah.
I think the ones around the front have been taken out with the addition of the new porch,
Yeah.
but the ones around the back remain.
Other questions? Discussion? We've had discussion. So from my perspective, I'm a little disappointed that the information couldn't have gone out with consultation to the community originally. But whether that information would have sparked any interest, as Dale has put, in a group wanting to actually put money forward and restore the building, that's debatable. So for me, I'll be guided by council and how we move forward. So if there's nothing further, I'll move to the recommendation and we'll take the first one, and that's that we receive the report. Do we have a mover? In a second. Councillor Newman.
Yeah.
Councillor Gallen, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Number 2.
I'll move number 2, Mr Chair.
And I'll second that.
We have a mover and a seconder for option 2, recommendation 2, that we agree to proceed with the removal of the reserve status and sale of 583 Belvedere Road. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We don't need to agree, do we?
A was number 2.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Linda. Item 7.5. The financial report for the 3 months ended 30th September 2024. And we welcome Karen back to the table. And you'll find that on page 18.
So this is the quarterly finance report for the period ending 30th of September. This report I will take as read, but a couple of comments. This was developed not long after we adopted the LTP, so the some of the information is not there because of timing, and it'll take the next few months to catch up on a couple of things like the capital works program. So there are some timing issues in terms of revenue and expenditure. For example, in our subsidies from Whakatahi, that would have been on hold during most of the period. And there are some timing issues in some of our revenue. The main revenue, which is rates, was collected and accounted for in this report as the adoption of the LTP allowed us to do that. That's a good thing. In terms of expenditure, again, there's some timing issues in that will level themselves out later. And in terms of the capital works program to date, obviously we've only spent 8% because most of the work was on hold in that time. So it's a very slim financial report for that period. We've enclosed a copy of the statement of financial performance and statement of financial position. Any questions?
Councillor Ayling.
I had one that's possibly for Solitaire, with regards to there being a shortfall in building consents. I just wondered, is that something that's raising alarm bells for you, or it's just, as it's mentioned, potentially to do with seasonal fluctuations?
I think you'll find it's seasonal fluctuations. Things slow down, winter, spring, building. Of course, it is a sign of the times. It's a problem nationwide.
Yeah.
Consenting is slower. And in that field, that is that risk you take, because you can then budget for a slower period, and then you just get a major boom comes in, and then you're wondering over. It's a really hard call to make. You're estimating numbers of consents.
No big alarm bell.
I just have a question regarding the statement of financial position. We currently, in terms of our total equity, we're currently at $275 million, and we're projecting in the plan to be at 312 million by the end of the year, which seems like, unless I'm wrong, that's $37 million. We're not proposing to spend that. So are we expecting another evaluation, or?
So the actuals are for 1 quarter.
Yeah.
And the budget is full year.
Understand that.
True.
But it's an as-at position.
$50 million uplift in PPE.
Yeah, we do have evaluation. It is a valuation year infrastructure. You're right.
We are
Yeah,
projecting a.
Yeah, so every 3 years we allow for a revaluation of our infrastructure assets.
Okay.
That's due this financial year.
Okay.
You're right.
Yeah. The only other comment I'd make is that our rates income is pretty close to order, despite the fact that we didn't send out any invoices. So does that mean that a lot of people pay monthly?
No, because it's accrued accounting, we were able to issue instalment 1 before the end of September, because we got the LTP through, and 3 instalments we were able to issue the first instalment.
Okay, so that's what we've invoiced rather than.
That's what we've invoiced. That recognise the revenue, not the cash.
Right.
Yeah.
I've got an observation, not a question.
L Newman.
My standard observation, event centre income, it's sitting very low, 63% of, they were anticipating 95 and it's at 60. And I know it's only 35,000, but it's continually sitting low. Just an observation, not a question.
At a time of year thing.
It's a constant every time we get this report thing.
Any further questions, Councillor Ayling?
Sort of a follow on to Lou's point there. Jeff mentioned that we'd be able to separate out the event centre, sorry, once we have the long-term plan finished. Is that something that's going to happen in the next wee while? So we have our own activity line?
We're currently the finance team are currently going through the annual report audit. So we're on week 5 of a 3-week audit. It's soon to be week 6 of a 3-week audit. And once that is complete, we will be able to start moving back to BAU activities, which will include creating an event centre activity.
Will it be ready in time for the next one of these beautiful reports?
So I'm hoping it'll be ready for our annual plan. I don't think it'll be ready for December. What we will need to do is recast history. So in order to get any kind of accurate information, we've got to give you historical information as well. So there's something to compare to. So we have to go back a couple of years in order to recast history, to separate out the event centre before we can start including it. And there's some technical work that's got to happen in the software in order to enable us to have a new activity. So we've got to essentially create a balance sheet for that activity. It's not just a profit and loss. You've got to create a balance sheet in order to have an activity. So it's a bit of work to do.
Yeah.
But it is.
certainly for the annual
It
plan.
was discussed this morning, councillor Ayling, would you believe? Yeah, it's on the work programme.
Nothing further. We have one recommendation, and that is received the report. Make a vote that. Councillor Ayling, thank you. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next, we have options for strengthening the Rural Advisory Group, page 97.
Very good. So if I could introduce the report, the council were keen to discuss a recommendation from the Rural Advisory Group that we consider, or you consider, upgrading the Rural Advisory Group to a formal committee. What I had attempted to do here with the help of Robin is to identify the pros and cons in doing that and bring forward those pros and cons to consider as to whether or not you wish to upgrade the Rural Advisory Group to a formal committee. Take questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions? No questions. Councillor Ayling.
One question. I wonder if you could speak to Jeff what you would imagine if a enhanced feedback loop would look like.
Yeah, it's a good question. What I've found is if we take the proposal for changing the revenue and financing policy, where we considered either introducing a SURP or changing the rural differential, that was certainly something that impacted the rural community quite significantly. And there's a variety of processes that we went through in order to engage with the community. Some of them involved you as councillors to have meetings in public halls or out at Gladstone, or to meet with the community, and others involved us targeting specific parts of the rural community and seeking their feedback. So, I visited some. I know the mayor went and visited some key members of the rural community, federated farmers, to get their feedback. So I think that loop is where we're able to not only seek their input, but also give them feedback on the decision and the rationale around that decision. So I think it's very important that it's a two-way loop rather than just a one-way, tell us what you think. We need to feedback as to, because there will be a time when council will make a decision that perhaps the rural community don't agree with, and we need to provide them with a rationale and a system to help them understand council's decision. So that's what I would view as an enhanced feedback loop, is ensuring key members of the community, either through the Rural Advisory Group, federated farmers or other channels, are informed as to why council's made a decision.
Councillor Cherry-Campbell.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Just on the actual TOR, point number 7, you've got a administrative support advice, which is also repeated as a title at number 9, but the wording underneath it, where it says the advisory group is an advisory body established by council, et cetera, I'm wondering if that's actually a little bit of duplication and probably ought to come at the top of under the purpose somewhere.
It's a fair comment.
Just a little bit of rejigging and editing. Thank you.
Council agrees, so I'm happy to make that change.
You want to discuss that before we move on to a...
Well, I think Dale's got a...
Oh, no, go for it.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, in terms of advisory groups, we've set these things up, set on a couple. We don't ever get any advice from them. There is no mechanism for the advisory groups to report back to council. I think the Rural Advisory Group, I think, is probably the most important one. And I think there should be a specific mechanism for them to report on what they're thinking, or for council to put their elected members who are on the advisory group specific things to communicate. I think that we need a semi-formal structure for communication with these people who are set up to advise us, because I don't see it now.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, good segue. That I actually think, and it's a new advisory group, obviously Mayor Ron set it up.
Yep.
I found it extremely useful. Because when you think back over the last 2 years, the things that have happened that have impacted the rural sector, like Cyclone Gabriel and Hale, you know, the bulk of the roading work out Flat Point and places like that, you know, the change of land use into forestry, stress and mental health and things like that. I found the information that the Rural Advisory Group brings to the table gives those who attend a lot deeper insight into what's actually happening out there. For me, even though, and I see that the staff's or the officers' preference is status quo, I'm quite in favour of transitioning it to a rural committee, simply because there's a bit of trial and error in this, you know, like it's a new committee. I found it really useful. I'd have no problem with it being a rural committee. The next council can make those changes if it's not delivering or not necessary. But I think in order to maintain the valuable contribution of the members, I think giving them, elevating the status a little bit would be really useful. My personal opinion, having sitting on that up till now.
Yeah, but not everybody does. And there is no real communication from the advisory group back to council in terms of.
Well, maybe not formally, but I can think of, for example, the consultation on SUIPs, for example.
Sure.
That's where the feedback through the Rural Advisory Group was extremely strong and persistent, and that ended up in a vote around the table that supported that came through. So I think it's a bit like any of the advisory groups or any of the committees. There is no formal reporting back on any of the committees, but those councillors who sit on that have the responsibility of bringing that message forward and articulating it to the rest of the council.
But the committees, risk and assurance and policy and projects, decisions that are made at those committees come up to council for ratification, don't they?
The recommendations.
Yeah.
Councillor Gallen, do you have a question?
I just got the feeling that we've talked about this with a rural advisory group, and they felt that talking to the members and getting feedback and that being put back on the table later on, that they didn't need to change things. They thought they were happy the way it was. If it was just left the way it was, it didn't have to be changed. They felt that what they said was being listened to by the members and being given back, so they didn't need to have anyone else in the middle.
I tend to agree with Councillor Gallen. The Rural Committee were, on second thought, comfortable with remaining an advisory group. They felt their voices had been heard. Councillor Lawrence makes a very good point in how do other councillors hear what the Rural Advisory Group are saying without actually attending the Rural Advisory Group meeting or any advisory group meeting. And the process that we have that could potentially do that doesn't feel particularly fulsome, which is, you know, the circulation of minutes, because the minutes don't really reflect the conversation that occurs. So I'm open to ideas as to how we may be able to do that.
Councillor Dillon?
Yes, thank you. I get the same, I've always had the same feeling as what Steve has, and as chair of the Rural Advisory Group, I try to get actions agreed on and come back to normal council. SURPS is a classic. Forestry rate is another one we're working on, and the cyclone happenings, the two cyclones, and also the well-being and basically the well-being of the farmers out there and how it's been affected them. There's a lot of really good discussion goes on at the rural advisory groups, and I think if I got the feeling the same as Steve, that they are reasonably happy with the way that's going on, as long as the actions are coming back and being dealt with, and then the feedback's going back to them. So I think it's a two-way thing. And whilst I think a formal committee adds probably a little bit more mana, but it also creates a hell of a lot more work for everybody. And if we can get along with this, like perhaps at our governance sessions, when we have them, that the chair of each of those advisory groups just gives a little bit of an insight back to the rest of the councillors in only a couple of minutes. It could be something that's always on the agenda. Rural advisory group feedback,
or even at council.
Yeah, or even at council,
which I think would work. We'll just
come back to the public.
So you
would come back into the public space a bit better, and and make the public feel a bit more involved.
That's right.
Yeah, I really like Councillor Della's thoughts there around having it being something that gets feedback around this table. I think would be helpful. I'm on the rural advisory group as well, and the conversations there are really enjoyable and interesting. And I think one of the things in the report was talking about how there's a freedom that's around that table where people do feel like they can speak quite frankly, because it doesn't have that, oh, we've got to have our, watch our P's and Q's, because it's a formal sort of setting. With it being more relaxed, it allows that conversation to be more honest. I think it's an important advisory group, and it would be great to have it reported back into council. I don't think it needs to be made into a separate committee. I think it stands its purpose quite well at the moment. And I think it'd be important as well, in my opinion, to hear more about what happens at the other advisory groups, because I'm not on a few of them and I don't attend. And so getting that feedback coming through and having it around this table, so people who watch our council meetings hear what happens, keeping that transparency will be beneficial. And I think the status quo of the advisory group with an added feedback loop would be good.
Thanks, Councillor Ayling. Councillor Newman.
If 42% of the population are rural, that means that 58% are urban. So I think we need to make sure that when we make these decisions, we're thinking about the majority of our ratepayers as well, who don't have the loud voices like federated farmers to have their backs all the time. I'm comfortable with having it as an advisory group, but if it went up to a committee, I would really like to have a conversation about how we can better represent our urban ratepayers and have them involved in the conversations that we have, because things like SURP also affect them equally in the opposite direction. So I just think we need to make sure that it's fair.
Thank you. Further discussion? I've just got a couple of comments here before listening to everyone around the table, and I'm in two minds about the change, because I believe as we move forward from local water done well, and potentially what happens with stormwater legislation as such, and leading into amalgamation, I think having a rural committee could be extremely valuable with helping us move forward into those amalgamation talks with our other councils. But again, I think there's pros and cons to leaving it as it is. So I have thoughts around the costs. There's not really anything mentioned about the cost, and it's
not materially different.
Yeah. And I do agree with, as already been said, the conversation around the table is very relaxed, and although it can be relaxed around the water race committee table as well. So, let's go to the recommendations and decide from there. We have the first one is we received the report. We have a mover and a seconder. Thank you, councillor Gallen and councillor Williams. All in favour?
Right.
Against? Carried. And either 2 or 3. Not sure if anyone would like to move or second one of them, and we go from there.
I'd like to move 7.3.
Steve Lawrence, you'd like to move that we agrees to retaining the Rural Advisory Group with amendments to the terms of reference, including a feedback loop to council. Do we have a
I'll
seconder?
second that.
Thank you, councillor Cherry-Campbell. All in favour, could I have a raising of hands just to get it accurate? There we go. That's unanimous. Well done. Let's move on to the Chief Executive report on page 102.
Steve, could we have a break? It's been 2 hours.
Yes, it's been 2 hours. Oh, only just. Oh, let's adjourn for, happy with 10 minutes, or do you just need 5 minutes, 10 minutes? We'll return at 3.
Oh, no, I can go to the bathroom.
All right. 3 o'clock, I'm at school out or something.